Good evening, I'm meteorologist Alan Matthew here with a very late night discussion regarding tomorrow/today's potential for some severe weather. So here we go. First things first, let us examine the 500 millibar level, and you see all these X's here that are lined up. We have a lot of energy in the upper levels and the mid levels of the atmosphere that is streaming in on almost, you could say, the downwind side of the Rocky Mountains, closer to the Pacific coast. That's coming in here, and it's going to be entering very deep. And this is going to set up some good upper level support for all of this potential severe weather that we're going to see tomorrow. And this is really all going to take shape down here in Texas, and then it's going to eject to the northeast. And as it does, we're going to have low pressure set up at the surface, and that's what's generating all the buzz about severe weather. So here's a look at a recent shot composite radar from Texas. You can see there's plenty of rain there and some stronger storms down in south central Texas, around San Antonio, Austin, Texas, perhaps in that neck of the woods. Here's a look at some of the Cape values. I didn't want to show this yet, but this is just model output suggesting that we do have some values of 1,000 joules per kilogram of Cape just off the Gulf Coast that we would be able to tap into. And again, this is not the gospel truth, but it certainly lends itself to the idea that there is some instability there in place that will come into play heading into tomorrow. Another look here, this now at some equivalent potential temperature surfaces. I know that means absolutely nothing to the average person, but just take this to say there are some boundaries that are in place here in the southeast. We've had some cold fronts pass through these past couple days, and some of those boundaries are still sitting out there around. Fortunately for us, they seem to be more displaced a little bit further to the south. There seems to be a boundary here kind of in South Alabama, which is going to be the area of greater risk as we'll talk about going forward here. But just know that there are some places where there are boundaries in place, and that will act to enhance the severe weather threat. Now we're coming back to Texas, and this is showing, again, equivalent potential temperature surfaces. You can just look at the massive gradient there, and this is our low pressure system starting to come to shape here in Texas. And here's the pressure falls again, another indication that we're about to have surface low pressure set up if we don't already, and that's going to be moving up through this region into east central Texas, around Tyler, Texas, and then as we get into tomorrow around lunchtime in the afternoon, that's going to be tracking into north central Louisiana, maybe just to the southeast of Shreveport, before finally coming into Mississippi, maybe just to the north of Vicksburg. Fairly confident on that. So let's talk about the nature of the threat. Here's the most recent SPC outlook issued. There's a large, slightly larger than it was before, area of moderate risk. We'll talk about what that means in a second. And then that's inside of an area here you see in the orange, enhanced risk area. And then we, the GTR, where I'm at, Oktibbeha, Lowndes, Clay counties, Noxubee County also in the slight risk area for tomorrow. So the main threat for severe weather is going to exist primarily to the south of I-20, but you have that enhanced risk kind of get a little bit above the I-20 corridor there. Now, disclaimer, this could change. We still have about 24 hours to go before all this happens, and I suspect, if anything, the SPC will not diminish the threat. They may bump it up. They may increase. They may, lift this enhanced risk area to the north slightly. They may expand the moderate risk. They might even issue a high risk because of the threat tomorrow. So here's what the terminology means. For the GTR, we're in the slight risk area. Scattered severe storms possible, short-lived and or not widespread, isolated intense storms possible. 1 or 2 tornadoes could be possible. I think the best language for our area as of right now is that we could see perhaps an isolated tornado at worst, or 2. That would be at worst. And, one thing is for sure, the greater threat, that moderate risk area that you see down there, that is where we expect more widespread coverage of severe storms. That is where you're going to see strong tornadoes develop that could be on the ground for an extended period of time. These are the ones that typically garner a lot of news attention, and in the days following, there's damage associated with them. And if you live in that area, let's go back. If you live down there, Hattiesburg, Biloxi, Wayne County, Ocean Springs, Gulfport, Mississippi, going over into Alabama. Montgomery is going to be in this. Mobile, Demopolis is going to be close to that. So any of those places, you live down there, you absolutely have to be attentive to the weather tomorrow. Be ready to act on a moment's notice. Here's my severe weather threat index. I don't like single numbers, but I do it because I know folks like it. I think for us in the GTR, damaging winds are the leading concern. I give it a 7 because I expect with the low pressure system as close as it is to our location and as intense as it is forecasted to be, the newest Euro data suggesting a 977 millibar low. That is significant. You don't see that very often. That means, in addition to this threat that we do have for tornadoes, I think for us, the wind is probably going to be the thing you're going to remember the most. The ground is already wet from all the rain we had today. We're going to see perhaps a little bit of spotty showers here and there tomorrow. And some of these trees that are not as well rooted into the ground could certainly be uprooted tomorrow. I think the winds will be kicking it around here at the surface. So I gave it 7 out of 10. 60 plus mile per hour winds certainly possible, maybe even a little bit stronger than that. We'll see what we're dealing with. Tornado threat, I gave it a 4. That's mainly because I think the greater risk is going to be to the south. Down there, for them, it could be as high as a 6 or 7. I wouldn't hesitate to put a 7 on South Alabama. You could maybe even argue for a little bit higher than 7. Hail, not as much of a concern. Flash flooding, not as much of a concern. Lightning, this is going to be at night, so not as much of a concern. You'll be in a sturdy structure, hopefully. Here's the winds. This is another reason I say winds are going to be the leading threat for us. This is not too far off the ground, a couple thousand feet. The winds are moving 60, 50, 60, even, up here close to 70 knots. That is fast, ridiculous. Some of that will find its way down to the surface, more than likely. And because of that, winds are going to be an issue. Small branches, trash cans, things that aren't anchored that could go flying like trampolines, probably will. Small trees with very poor root systems, dead trees could be uprooted. So that's definitely a possibility. Uncertainty, how certain, how confident are we? Here's the ensemble members, bunch of models, where they think the low pressure center is going to be tomorrow at this is lunchtime. Very confident it's going to be in East Texas, around Tyler, Texas. Going a little further, this is the afternoon, 6 p.m., 0Z. Still, high confidence. Maybe not as much confidence with regards to timing, but pretty confident on the track of the low. It's entering the Mississippi Delta just to the north of Vicksburg. And then you can see, again, high confidence as we head on towards midnight now. The low pressure center very close to Memphis, Tennessee, perhaps a little bit further south into north central Mississippi. The further north that goes, the higher north the threat will creep. So if this thing ends up being very close to Memphis, we could see that enhanced risk area creep a little bit further to the north. If it goes a little further north of Memphis, you bet your bippies that enhanced risk area is going to creep up closer to us. But as it stands right now, greatest risk... Okay, let's just go on. I got a graphic for that. Cloud coverage, big question here. Any kind of breaking in the clouds would help to stabilize the atmosphere. Broken cloudiness is bad. And here's a look at one model. This is the NAM, I believe, yes, 12-kilometer NAM, valid at 21Z tomorrow, 3 p.m., showing an area here where, maybe you could have some breaks in the clouds. Not saying you will, but maybe some broken cloudiness right here, and that makes sense, given the risk area. It also shows it extending up in here a little bit more. A little bit cloudier up here in the northern half of the state. That would not bode well for severe weather chances. If the clouds stick around all day, we might be good. Surface moisture, also big question. Dew points, sunshine, all of it is a factor. This is showing a pocket there of like mid-60s dew points. Again, in that high-risk area, with some deeper moisture down in the Gulf, but mid-60s is certainly sufficient for severe weather. You could argue maybe you'd want to see it more closer to the upper 60s. And then you can see how that kind of migrates there a little bit to the north, so it's like it comes up here as the low pressure is moving through the area. It gets pushed to the north a little bit, mid-60s there. So that's, again, location. Here's where it's going to happen. Now notice how I put, this is not a line. I hate lines because lines are, here's where the thread ends, right here. That's not how reality works. Reality is more of these various shades of gray. So the greater threat is going to exist to the south. Really, I-20 and south, you could argue, is the absolute greatest threat. But here's the wiggle room, and this could change. The forecast could change over the next 12 to 18 hours, certainly. And, I put this, and you can see how kind of this lighter, less intense red extends almost up to where we're at here in Columbus. And I think that's just to symbolize how the enhanced risk could creep further to the north. I'm not saying it'll get all the way to Lowndes County, but it could certainly come closer in our direction, depending on how the forecast evolves. Greater risk, though, to our south. That's where they're going to see the potential for several strong tornadoes. Timing. Here's a look at what the radar could look like. Probably won't look exactly like this, but here's your low pressure center here. You've just got a massive amount of forcing with this. And upper level dynamic support. You've got some cells here that look like they're trying to develop. Here's some out here. These would be, of most concern. This is 6 p.m. though. This is just getting started. Here we go into 9 p.m. Now you're kicking in business. You've got some discrete cells out here. And again, some over here that look like they're could be producing tornadic storms, especially these in and around this area. And I wouldn't even say that this one here, any of these could. Don't get attached to the locations you see here. That's not necessarily where this is going to set up. This up here looks more to me like wind, a wall of wind that'll probably be moving at some kind of angle here out of the southwest to the northeast. So we could be looking at very strong winds, bow echo type of deal, which again could carry with it the threat of a spin-up tornado. And then here we go towards midnight. You can see activity still going on over central Alabama. It's going to be a very long night for you folks there in Alabama. But a lot quieter here in Mississippi. This is going to wrap around, and we're going to see very powerful winds throughout the night. blank graphic. So timing, not early afternoon, but late afternoon. That should say 4 to 5 p.m. to the late night. For us here in GTR, probably along the lines of 10, maybe at the latest 1 a.m. Bottom line, please be situationally aware of the weather. Have a timely, accurate source of information. Have more than one source of information. The forecast will be subject to minor tweaks and refinements as we go forward. The track of the low at this point is fairly high confidence. We're certain there's going to be a powerful low pressure system tracked through the northwestern corner or through north central Mississippi. This event will primarily occur during the late afternoon, but even more so into the night hours, which makes it even more dangerous because most folks want to settle down. Some folks like to go to bed really early. And you need to have a way to get warnings if you're going to go to bed, especially if you live in South Alabama. You need to wake up when there's a tornado warning. It could be the difference between life and death. All modes of severe weather possible for the GTR as well. An isolated tornado is not out of the question, perhaps two. Greater coverage, however, and more intense tornadoes will focus to our south and east. Damaging winds, I still believe, will be the leading concern for us. Winds in excess of 60 miles per hour will and should be quite easy to obtain given the dynamic setup of tomorrow's atmosphere. So this wasn't exactly a short update, but hopefully I will post more about this in the morning when there's new information. Maybe not necessarily in the morning, but certainly sometime tomorrow in the afternoon. You'll hear from me again. Hope you all have a great night. Keep it tuned to my Twitter page at AlanMatthewWX for the latest updates, or my Facebook page as well.